so much. Welcome to Understanding Financial Aid, FAFSA Simplification for Youth Experiencing Unaccompanied Homelessness. I'm excited to join you. I'm really excited to get this information out about simplification. So for some of y'all who have joined in other presentations, you may have seen some of this already, but we're going to really focus on the components for those who are experiencing unaccompanied homelessness. And I'm looking at the attendee list. Hello, my beautiful humans of education. I'm so glad that you're all here. We'll go ahead and get started. If you would like to access this presentation like right now, like maybe it's easier for you to follow along on your phone or in other ways, please use this QR code. I also have a link in the chat for y'all too, so you can have access to the presentation now. I will say in Google, there's a little bit of like a formatting change. Like I feel like there's some formatting that's a little bit off in the Google world. So like some of the pictures may not format perfectly, but it gives you a good idea, and then you'll get the presentation later on as well. So today we're going to talk about the FAFSA Simplification Act. We're going to talk about FSAID changes. We're going to talk about the application changes, the student aid report changes. We're going to talk about new provisions for youth experiencing unaccompanied homelessness. And then we're also going to talk about how to prepare for the 24-25 FAFSA, especially for this population, and resources. We always have resources. They are free resources. I'm the most frugal woman of Thurston County, so we will never charge for any of the resources that we list on here. So I'm always going to have a disclaimer until we know the whole picture, and that is that we don't know the whole picture yet for simplification. We are still getting more pieces from federal student aid about this process, so there are still some components of the application and the FSAID process that they're still in development. And so everything in this presentation, things are subject to change. I think most of it we have. When it comes to the outreach side and supporting students, maybe not as much on the back end side for our beautiful financial aid administrators who are super patient and waiting to find out that stuff. But we will keep you updated. So as soon as we know something, you will know something. I check every day to see if there's any updates, and then we create resources based on that. So I just want everyone to know that we're all in this together as we roll out this application together to our students. Okay, so you might hear two different terms. You might hear FAFSA simplification, but you might also hear better FAFSA, better future. And I just wanted to talk about really quickly what those two different components were. So better FAFSA, better future is the communication campaign that was built to increase knowledge about the changes to the financial aid application based upon the FAFSA Simplification Act. So one is the act that changed the application and the process for aid, and the other is the communication campaign to make people more aware. So let's talk about the FAFSA Simplification Act. It is the largest overhaul of the FAFSA in, like 20 years. It is huge. It changes the need analysis, policies, procedures. It doesn't just change the front end, but it changes the back end as well. So this is a huge lift for practitioners, for college, financial aid administrators, everybody. The big thing I want to state here, though, is that for our students, especially our high school seniors who have never seen a financial aid application, for them, this isn't going to be a huge change because they don't know what a financial aid application looks like. And so for them, this is all going to be a financial aid application. It's going to be a little bit harder for our returning adults and returning students who maybe did the application last year because they are used to that process. But the huge lift, I think, will be on us as practitioners who are having to learn new terminology, opening up that brain to make sure there's room for all the new terminology and changes to the application. So all of this happened through two pieces of legislation, and that is the Future Act and the FAFSA Simplification Act. And so in this process, if you're a dork about financial aid like me, I know you're in the room. If you want to read the whole thing, you can. I encourage you, if you're going to read the Simplification Act, like maybe make yourself a charcuterie board of deliciousness that you're going to sit down, eat some delicious food, and read through it. But if you don't want to read through it, we have all of our stuff in the training that covers most of it. All of this was supposed to be implemented last year, but they had a 1-year kind of delay, and now we are just waiting for this year for it to be released. There are major changes coming to the FSAID as well as the application process, and so we'll talk about both of those. So for our students, there will be FSAID changes. For our students who've already created an FSAID, this will not impact them as they've already created an FSAID and they may have to verify to do two-step verification, but they won't have to recreate an FSAID. So if you created an FSAID, it's a one and done process. You have it, you create it once, it's your account. For those who have not created one, everyone will be required to create one, and we're going to talk more about these changes. So everybody who contributes to a financial aid application, so any contributor, whether it be a student or a parent for students who need parent information, or even for our adult returners who maybe have a spouse that needs to provide information, they will have to create an FSAID in order to engage in the process. FSAIDs is a separate process now. So in the past, especially for our high school population, we've been able to create an FSAID, like have a financial aid night, create an FSAID, eat 2 slices of pizza, and then go right into the FAFSA. This year and beyond, because of the changes to the FSAID has to be verified before they can use it in the application. And that verification process takes 1 to 3 days. So now it's kind of a 2-step process. Students are going to create their FSAID, they're going to wait for it to be verified, and then they're going to do their applications. The 24-25 application and beyond will no longer have a standalone signature page. And for our youth experiencing homelessness, especially our unaccompanied youth, this won't impact them because they are not going to require parent information anyway. Multi-factor authentication is a component of the new FAFSA. It means that anytime, when a student's creating an FSAID, they need to verify their phone number, their email address. Their phone number, if they don't verify it and somebody else is using that number, starting this release date in December, someone else could verify that phone number to their name. So we want to try to get students to verify their phone and their email address. Federal Student Aid is really suggesting the Authenticator app because it can be used without internet access. But I do know that can be a challenge with our students if they don't have access to technology or maybe are hesitant to download another app for this process. Every person who logs into Federal Student Aid, they are now going to be required to do multi-factor authentication. So anytime you log into Federal Student Aid, you're going to have to get your code sent to your phone or to your email or using an Authenticator app to access your account every single time. Another change is the backup codes. So when a student creates their FSAID or a parent or anyone who needs that FSAID, they're going to be presented with a backup code. And that backup code allows somebody to access their account. So they can access their own account if they can't verify their information through multi-factor authentication. So if they can't use their phone, maybe they've changed their phone number and maybe they don't have access to their email anymore, the backup code would allow them to access their account. They want to write down their backup code so they always have access to it. If they lose their backup code, and let's say they still have access to their account, they still are able to get in because they have access to everything, they can get a new backup code if they've lost it and still have access. But they can't get if they don't have a backup code and they lose access to maybe they're verifying through their phone or email and don't have an authenticator app, then they have to go through ID verification to access their account, which requires them to present Federal Student Aid with forms of ID to verify their information. This year, there is a big change. So Federal Student Aid has developed a process for people who do not have Social Security numbers to set up an FSAID. So when they said everyone's required, it's everybody. So this is going to impact predominantly our mixed status families. This is a knowledge-based process. And so if the student or whoever is creating the account who doesn't have a Social Security number, let's say they're from a freely associated state or they or their parent is undocumented and doesn't have a Social Security number, when they go through this process, they'll be presented with knowledge-based verification, which means it'll ask them between 1 and 4 questions. Things like, who do you know that lives at this address? Where have you worked in the past? Things like that. They'll be asked questions. And then once they are asked those questions, if they are able to answer them correctly, they are verified automatically and they're able to use their FSAID. If not, then they have to go through an ID verification process. And so here's kind of what that flow chart looks like. So the changes to the application itself. So there are multiple changes to the form. We're going to talk about all of these, and then we're also going to talk about how it'll impact our youth experiencing homelessness. So there's an onboarding process. We're going to talk about the release date, but I don't have the actual release date, so don't get too excited. We just know it's still in December. Role-based information entry, contributor information, income information exchange. We'll talk about the student aid index, who's the parent, if applicable, family size, number of college, and assets. So the page looks a little different this year for students. What I like about this new rollout is that it does say 24-25 FAFSA form, start a new form, edit an existing, need access to last year's form. And I feel like that's a little different than just presenting two different year dates and telling a student to pick. I think this helps maybe inform a student on which application they should be doing a little bit more clearly. It also clearly tells them it takes an hour. They don't have to do it all at once. And it says most people take less than an hour, but we know it takes a little bit of time, especially with that FSA process and gathering documents. So when the student starts the form the first time, or a parent if applicable, they are going to be taken through a process called onboarding, where they get 4 slides that talk about the process itself. It has a video that accompanies it. It also talks about what to expect, what their next steps are, and how long the process will take. So as you can see here, we know everybody knows this already, that the application is delayed this 1 year only. So when I talk about financial aid, I always say when it gets pumpkin spice and everything nice out there, it's time to think about financial aid. And I know that's hard with like literally Starbucks, you keep releasing that pumpkin spice in like August, but I don't think it's too early to think about aid then. But for this 1 year only, we have a delay. So we're going to have you think about this as like a peppermint mocha situation. So, and now we have peppermint mochas out, but somewhere in December, you will be able to access the application for this 1 year only. Next year, we're back to our regularly scheduled pumpkin spice situation where in October 1st, the application opens, best month of the year. It starts with a financial aid opening up and it ends with a magical day where you can say 3 words and get free candy. I always tell students, if you are consuming fun-sized candy obtained from usually a stranger, it's a good time to take all those fun-sized candies and do a full-size task and do your financial aid. So the class of 2024 is going to complete the 24-25 FAFSA. They're going to do this using 2022 income information. So every other year beyond this year is going to be October 1st. But this 1 year, we have a change of delay that it'll be released some magical day in December. So role-based information entry, I like this because if a student does have to have a parent contribute, and I know with our youth experiencing homelessness, that's not the case typically, but for those who do, the student and parent have their own sections to fill out and they can do them at the same time. So each role, as identified in the application, will have their own pertinent section to them that they will complete. So both the student and the contributor, the parent, can do it at the same time. The this role-based process has really eliminated that save key. That save key where students would have to remember 4 digits that they put into a computer and like for more than 5 seconds, it was always a challenge. This has eliminated that. Anytime working on the form, people are going to be logging in using that FSA ID though. So parents and spouses will be listed as like the contributors as anyone who's contributed to the application, but you'll see that language for our parents specifically. And so they're going to be listed on there. And I think just informing people that contributing to an application doesn't mean you're contributing financially, you are contributing information. So from some of our youth who are maybe they're not experiencing homelessness, but maybe they're unable to access information from their parents about the application, like because they've heard the word contributor. I've had parents who say, well, it says I'm a contributor, I'm not paying for this. I think it's informing people who are contributors that the contributing of information does not mean contributing income. And students in the application who have to contribute, invite parents, will need, if applicable, their social security number. So they'll need their first name, last name, birthday, and social to invite a parent. This is a piece, this is why the FSAID process is so strict and requires verification, is now there will be this federal tax information is going to be transferred directly from the IRS, not like the data retrieval tool. So those of us who use the data retrieval tool, you would go in, you'd have to enter in your tax information as exactly listed on the tax year document that you are trying to access. And if, like, let's say the person who prepared your taxes added an extra space somewhere, we're supposed to magically know that that space is a space on the form. And then if you don't put it in exactly as listed, you wouldn't be able to match. That doesn't exist anymore. Now it is a direct transfer of federal tax information from the IRS through the Income Information Exchange. And so there are limited paths for people to enter manual information, but everyone will have to provide consent to access information. So providing consent for our students and families, what that means is when they access the application, they have to provide consent for their information to be transferred from the IRS. And this even means for our students maybe who maybe you're working with an unaccompanied homeless youth who has not filed taxes. It's going to transfer over that they're a non-tax filer. Students, parents, anyone who's required has to provide consent or they will be ineligible for federal student aid. And so this is a big piece of really informing the student and families about the impacts of not providing that. The ESC has been replaced with the SAI, and I say replaced, but like really it used to be the SAI. For those of us who are old enough to remember, it used to be called the Student Aid Index. But the EFC, the expected family contribution, will be replaced with a new methodology of determining aid. There's a new formula. What I like about this is two different changes. One, expected family contribution, when I worked with families, they have told me that term there, like EFC, is that I'm expected as a family to contribute this amount. And so I had a lot of families that would say, like, how am I going to afford this? They won't even continue on in the process because they thought that they were going to have to write a check for the amount that was in the EFC. The SAI is a different index. What I like about it is it also can be negative. So it can be negative. The minimum SAI can be like, it can be negative for the first time. So we know that working with students with a zero EFC for one family can mean something completely different for a zero EFC for another. That is a very large category. And this negative SAI has allowed institutions to make more insight in making those decisions about funding. For those who have to provide parent information, the who's the parent has also changed. So who's the parent has changed to the parent that provides the greater portion of students' financial support. And so it is especially for divorced families, it has changed pretty significantly. It means that some of our students who do have to provide parent information might be reporting information from a household they don't reside in. And so don't worry, because we're going to go over some screens to talk about special circumstances and other things our students might be experiencing to help them navigate this. But for students that need to provide parent information, they don't have a special or unusual circumstance, they will be able to use what's called the parent wizard to figure out who the parent's going to be for contributing information. And so what this is, I know parent wizard sounds super amazing. I was like very excited. I love parents and wizards, but really what it is, it's just a tool to help the students navigate who should be providing as a contributor. There is a paper version of this as well as a digital version. I encourage sending out the paper version to your families beforehand, before doing an event, because I feel like in this process, we're acknowledging bio families, but not chosen families. And we're asking really private information about marital status, just things like that. I think it's important for students to have access to that beforehand so they can, so that there's anything that triggers a student or any trauma, that we are trying to be mindful of that. And if you're having a financial aid night, I also encourage you to have like a counselor's office open. We have students in this process who find out they're undocumented. I had a student who found out like the week before that their parents were getting divorced, and they were actually divorced. At that point, it was the first time she had to like verbalize it, and she just broke down. And then also we're using things like we're requiring name as listed. the name is listed on a social security card, which might be a dead name. And I just feel really uncomfortable with using dead names. And I think acknowledging to students this is a flawed, like there's some flaws to the system, and that they're working on equity, but they're going to be asking questions that acknowledge an identity that they don't match with. And I think just having counseling available is helpful. And I'm happy to share at the end where you can get that document to share out. I have so many resources for y'all. Okay, so household size, because they're using the household that the student might not reside in, the household size, family size can be updated. It's pulled from the taxes, but they can update it very easily. Okay, number in college. This is where I wish I had emotional support chocolate for y'all. But because we're virtual, I can't. So I'm like digital chocolate. This is a big change, especially for those with their own children in school. No longer will the number in college impact the SAI. So it's not going to be divided like the EFC was divided by the number in college. So this means that families that have multiple students in college at the same time might see, especially for those who have current students in school, might see a change to their eligibility. So there's some students who could see a reduction in loss and Pell because of this change. I do encourage students who are experiencing that to reach out to their institution, because I know institutions are figuring out different ways to potentially calculate institutional aid to better support students in this way, but it's something to be aware of. Okay, so assets. Assets is another big change in a couple different ways. Families with an AGI of 60,000 or less are able to they won't have to answer the asset questions. Now, if the student goes through and they are required to have parent information, it's going to ask them the questions, but it won't calculate them for the SAI. The contributor, if they complete the section first, then the student won't even be asked the questions. A big change that you're going to see in the assets is the change to reporting investment farms and small businesses. There is no longer the 100 employee waiver that has existed in the past. So anyone with a small, like who's a contributor, if there's a small business or an investment farm, and that investment farm language is the key piece there, they will have to provide information on that, and there's more guidance coming from federal student aid. There's a House bill and a Senate bill that were introduced to try to reinstate that 100-person waiver. We're keeping an eye on it. But if you want to go through those bills, feel free to. Again, I encourage a charcuterie platter while you're going through all of that stuff. There are more languages in the FAFSA when it comes to support. So the application itself will only be available in English and Spanish, but translation services and support will be provided for the top 10 languages spoken in the US. So the student can call the contact center and receive support in those languages. Students can list up to 20 schools on their FAFSA this year. I encourage, if they have more than 20, it's time to narrow it down. Look at what the programs are. Is it, what is the options for you? But I would not, if it's not 20, 20 is a lot. So I always am like, you're not gonna be able to go to all 20. You don't have a DeLorean or a time turner, so you're gonna have to start narrowing it down. Students are required to complete the demographic section. They can say that they would like to do not want to reply to respond to certain questions, but they do have to complete that section. And then the student aid report has some changes that I really love. Number one, the biggest one that I'm excited about is in the student submission summary, which is we formally call the student aid report. All the names are changing. It reminds students to request an adjustment for special circumstances, but also in the submission summary, they can see their answers, where the errors are, and they can see if they've been picked for verification. So in the past, we've had to look for that magical asterisk to see, was the student picked for verification on the SAR? And now it tells students you've been selected for a federal process called verification, a process in which we verify information about your application, and it tells them what it is and that they've been picked so that those students can maybe start the process early of gathering the documents they need for the verification process. I'm hoping that this is smoother for students and for our financial aid administrators and offices who are sending out those requests. So let's talk about like the most exciting part, which is the provisions, the new provisions for youth experiencing unaccompanied homelessness. There are several new provisions that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the single question rule. We're going to talk about determination frequency, the status determination timeline, those who are authorized to verify status. I'm most excited about this. And then the provisionally independent status. And if you have questions, please, please, please put them in the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer them. So the single question rule. So the single question rule, it required Department of Ed to ensure that this year's application and beyond will have one single question about homelessness status, and it has to be easily understood. It's a screening question that has to be easily understood. And it really, the way that they've implemented it, it has to be distinct, and I can show you what it looks like. So on here, this is what it looks like in the 24-25 application. It asks very clearly at any time on or after, and it'll ask the date for the year, and they adjust the date depending on the application year that they're applying. Was the student unaccompanied and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk for homelessness? If the student answers yes to this, then it's going to ask, did any of the following determine that you were homeless or at risk for becoming homeless? And so that opens up, when they say yes to it, it opens up the next level of the question. And you will see a whole list of people that can make that designation now. We'll talk more about that. So that's what it looks like for our students. It's very clear, short, one question opens it up. If the student is considered independent, this is the screen they will see on their dependency status, and it'll move them through the application to the next section. And just a reminder that independent students don't have to provide parent information. And in the past, it has said, you're considered independent. Would you like to provide parent information? And that was confusing for students, because I had students who thought, well, if I don't provide it, maybe I won't get into a college, or maybe they didn't understand. So this is just very clear. So determination frequency, status does not need to be redetermined every single year. Any student who's determined as unaccompanied homeless youth for a preceding award year is going to be presumed independent for each subsequent year at the same institution. So no longer do students have to continually provide information unless the student informs the institution that their circumstances have changed, or the institution has specific conflicting information about the student's independence. So the schools are allowed to ask, has your circumstance changed? But basically, they only redetermine if they meet that criteria. Determination of unaccompanied homeless youth status as well as foster youth status have to be made as quickly as practical. And I want to preface it with this. I think we do have some financial aid officers in the room. I'm just going to say right now, there are a lot of challenges right now in staffing and financial aid offices. I feel like every week I see another change of staff at the colleges when it comes to financial aid offices. There're just not enough financial aid officers out there. And it's not just a Washington problem, it's a US problem, because there's no like degree path where like I can go to college and become a financial aid officer. There's no degree path to go do this. It is about like experience, and that takes time. And so I'm finding that a lot of our financial aid offices, in addition to being understaffed right now, are also navigating not just this component of FAFSA simplification, but the back end changes as well to their own processes. And it's a huge lift. I just want to acknowledge that when we're saying they need to be made as quickly as practical, that the reality is that there is less staffing and a different time window of creating award letters because of the delay in financial aid. And so I just, when working with financial aid offices, acknowledging that is the reality that we're experiencing. And when I asked around, I was like, is it just us? It's so many different states that are experiencing this. Now, if you're listening to this and you have students who are interested in the beautiful world of financial aid, I encourage them to try to get work study, because work study is a gateway to financial aid work. And we will welcome you with open arms. But that is just the reality I'm seeing in a lot of the financial aid offices. So they have to make these determinations as quickly as possible. They do have guidances on when they have to make it by, but I encourage students to be in open communication with their financial aid office about their determination. Um, uh, make friends with your financial aid officer. It's okay for them to reach out. Like I have students that are scared that like if they reach out to a financial aid officer, that the financial aid officer like can impact like decisions about admissions and other things, or they're just scared of financial aid officers in general. They are beautiful humans who want to award students, but they have to follow specific criteria, and really just having them reach out is important. So let's talk about who is authorized now this year to verify the status of those experiencing homelessness. And this I get excited about because it used to be very limited, but now it's opening up to more people who understand their students' situation. So of course the school district homelessness, the liaison or their designee at the district, but I'm finding that some districts are struggling with staffing as well. And so it can be the director or designee or director of an emergency or transitional shelter, a street outreach program, homeless youth drop-in center, or other programs serving individuals who are experiencing homelessness. This is an exciting one for me. A director or designee of a director of a program funded under TRIO or Gear Up. And so I think our Gear Up schools are very excited about that. And then financial aid administrators. And so I want to make sure that in this process, you might be now someone who's a designee, and there are some tools that you can use to write your letters for the financial aid offices. So for unaccompanied homeless youth experiencing homelessness, documentation that's authorized from those entities. It can include a documented phone call, a written statement, or a verifiable electronic match. If you are trying to figure out, oh my gosh, I am one of these people now, there are so many templates out there. I love Schoolhouse Connections. I feel like this is like the easiest template because it literally says put your letterhead up here, and this is what you can use to provide information to the financial aid office for a determination. And they have other templates on there, and there's other like tools for our financial aid officers as well, because financial aid administrators must make determinations for unaccompanied homeless youth who are unable to get determinations from other entities. And so these determinations, they're based on a written statement or documented interview for a student that confirms that they are an unaccompanied homeless youth. There are a lot of tools about how to do these interviews, and there's specific guidance on how they determine this based on definitions from the McKinney-Vento Act. And I'm happy to share the Schoolhouse Connection link. I'm adding it to the Padlet as well for those of you who are going to be serving youth experiencing homelessness. So not all of our students, it's like a clean and cut, like they're unaccompanied and experiencing homelessness. They could be also experiencing an unusual circumstance. And there's a section on the application in which they can indicate this so that they can be considered for what's called provisional independence. So on here, it lists different reasons why for the student contacting the parent, it could be a risk to the student. And I appreciate this because I've had students in the past, like I had a student that they thought because the federal government was asking for information from a parent that the federal government superseded a local court protection order. And so they reached out to the parent and broke the protection order, but also put themselves at risk because they thought federal government's above the state government when it comes to asking for things. So I think this really acknowledges that, like, if this is going to put you at risk, you might be in this circumstance, and this is where you're going to acknowledge that so that we can provide you with a process that won't put you at risk. So if a student's experiencing, if they've left home due to an abusive or threatening environment, or been abandoned or estranged, and they've not been adopted, or they're unable to contact or locate their parents, they can any of these circumstances, they can select yes to, and then it will say you've been considered provisionally independent. And what will happen from there is for the provisional independent status, they will allow them to receive their SAI, and the school will be able to make a final determination depending on the information they receive from the student. So they submit this, and then they connect with their college financial aid office. Okay, so for provisionally independent statuses, financial aid administrators' requirements is they have to they have to be able to review and adjust requests in a reasonable timeline, as it just like the other status of being able to do it in a reasonable timeline. They have to provide students with a final determination of their dependency status and financial aid award as soon as practical. After reviewing all the requested documentation, they have to retain that documentation, including interviews, for at least 3 years after the student's last term of enrollment. So that's the retention rate. And in this process, again, this is another process that the financial aid offices are going to take on. So this is another component of why I think that it's the capacity could be a little bit less in the financial aid offices, because they're doing all of this at once. So preparing for the 24-25 FAFSA and WAFSA, to be honest, the WAFSA will come out in the same timeline. Preparing for the cycle, number one, we have lots of resources and lesson plans for y'all. So if you're doing like FSAIDs with students, or creating WAFSA accounts, you can do that now. So doing the things that you can do now before the application opens is helpful, especially for our high school seniors. If you're a high school counselor and you're doing your financial aid advising days, I know that it's past like the October like timeline of what we normally see. Like financial aid advising days start September 1st and go through December 1st. But we have lots of things that you can do that are not completion events to do your FAD informational work. We have taken all the requirements of financial aid advising day and broke them down into 5 lesson plans that are plug and play and easily they're easy for implementation, even if you can't do it yourself. We have written them so that you can have like an avid classroom instructor do them, interns do them, things like that. I encourage schools to wait to plan their financial aid completion events until like they know the release date. I've had some schools who are like, it'll be out December 1st. And I love your like enthusiasm and that really that's a cup half full, but it may not come out then. And so I want to make sure that you're not like scheduling all your events before the application comes out. So finding a time after the release date to be able to do that support work for your students, especially for like one-on-ones. I've had those working with youth experiencing homelessness to like schedule the one-on-ones for like December, like the first week of December. And you could do that to do like maybe the FSAID, but we don't know what day it's going to come out in December yet. We have trainings as well as a Padlet for you all, and I can share that link out to you that has all of the resources. We will be doing trainings in person as well as virtually on simplification. We are also hosting financial aid nights for students. Like tonight, we have a 12th year financial aid night where students can come learn about financial aid and take their next step of completing their FSAID or WAFSA account. We have like 140 students registered. There's plenty of rooms. Feel free to send your students to those events. Make sure your website's up to date. So review your materials. If you are serving adults as well as high school students, you're probably going to want to have to figure out how you're going to host 24-25 information and beyond, and also at the same time inform students on applying for aid for 23-24. Recycle all your old materials. If you are at a high school and using 12th year campaign materials, please feel free to recycle old materials. Your postcards are still good, but like if you are using a black and white version of the 12th year campaign workbook, please save me some gray hairs and just recycle those, because they're significantly old and we are happy to send you new ones. There are new college and career knowledge books that you can order, but updating your materials to reflect the changes to the application is really important to keep it accurate. If you are using Ready, Set, Grad, .org. Just as a heads up, especially for the colleges who have a section for undocumented students. Please do me a favor. I'd be so grateful if you just look to see if you're using Ready Set Grad. Ready Set Grad we haven't owned as an agency in over 5 years, and we don't own the website anymore, so it does not take them to an educational website. So I'd encourage you to update that to wasac.wa.gov. You can review all 255 slides of the 24-25 FAFSA if you want, or we have a line-by-line presentation that is significantly shorter that is recorded that we gave this week yesterday, and it'll be up on our YouTube probably in the next day or two. We have our trainings that we talked about. We also have federal student aid resources. There are worksheets for special populations, as well as information about different components of simplification. If you want to play around in the new FAFSA, I encourage you to use the FAFSA prototype. I've used this a bit to it can be buggy, but I've used it to kind of navigate what it would be like for students to see those questions and what it would look like. NCAN has amazing resources as always, and they're doing webinars through December. If you're a dork about financial aid and you want to see simplification case studies about how this can impact different groups, I encourage you to use NASFA's case studies. It's really interesting. If you're not a financial aid dork, it's okay. I won't hold it against you, but it's really cool to look at. 12th Year Campaign has resources to support you, as well as our Padlet. So you can sign up as a 12th Year Campaign site, but also we have a Padlet for students that will navigate them through the financial aid application. And we have a Padlet for y'all is where I put everything. I put updates, like I've created a presentation deck on the changes to the FSA ID for those who are undocumented. We will be adding other resources on the Padlet for y'all. So there's a student Padlet that's like a way smaller version than the practitioner Padlet. The practitioner Padlet has everything I think you could possibly use about financial aid in it. And then Europe has translated resources and financial aid resources and guides for supporting youth experiencing unaccompanied homelessness, as well as youth experiencing foster care. And with that, I would love to get to questions. I'm going to try to scroll through. I'm being blinded by the sun. I apologize.
No worries. And Christina, we have some questions in the chat as well. I will be sending you those questions directly because I can't add them to the Q&A.
Okay. So do we want to go through, let's see here.
Why don't we start with the first question that talks about Social Security? Yeah.
Yes. So, okay, for Social Security, it says, as a parent, I do not want to give my child my Social Security number if they're not at the table with me. And yeah, we should not be sharing Social Security number like texting and email. So I know that this is challenging, that students would have to have access to it. The only thing I can say is for those who are going to need parent information is to start norming why students are going to be asking for this information now. I think, students are going to come to parents and say, I need your name, your birthday, and your Social Security number. And that's like a red flag wrapped in a red flag. And so I think informing parents that your student's going to be asking for information, and that maybe if they could be present while the student's filling out the application, since the student and parent can do it at the same time, that maybe they do it at the same time in the same room, and that they may feel more comfortable with that.
Do you want me to read the next question to you as well?
Yeah, if you want to read them, I will, because I'm also looking through the chat real quickly.
No worries. So the next question is, where can I get the paper copy to get to the families ahead of time?
Okay, so the paper application, they probably won't release until the application comes out. So, because the only two options for completing the application is paper or on the website. I saw the draft version, but I haven't seen the final version. As soon as the final version's available, I'll be able to put it on the Padlet and you can print it from there. I know you can also order them if you're like printing is a capacity issue. I know that in the past you've been able to order them from federal student aid as well. I'm just not sure if that's an option this year.
So the other question is asking, can directors or designees of community-based organizations serving youth experiencing homelessness, but maybe not exclusively experiencing homelessness, still verify student status?
So that one I have to check. I would have to check and follow up with you. I believe so, as long as there's like, if they, like, I know like there are drop-in shelters who also have other services that aren't specifically just for youth experiencing homelessness, but they provide a bunch of other youth services. And so I think as long as you meet the component of the verification piece, but I would like to follow up with you, and I want to make sure, Haley, I would like to make sure I get you like a final answer. And so if that's okay, I would love to. Thank you. I was like, I'd rather like have like, so I can give you exactly where it states that so that you have that as follow-up. I'm all about citing sources. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No worries. And the other question we have on the Q&A states, is a student independent if they currently have a guardian, but will turn 18 soon?
So if they have like when they're filling out the application, it's going to ask, do you have a legal guardian? Like, are you in a legal guardianship as defined by a court, which is not like some people will say like I have a legal guardian, but it's not defined by a court. So they need to check and see the like how is that legal guardianship defined? Is it defined by a court? Is it a like other process? Like I've had students who have like a legal guardian who's a medical guardian. There's different types of guardianship. So I would check to see if it's defined by court, and then it asks in there, are you in a legal guardianship as defined by a court? And then they can select that, and they'll be considered independent. And I'm trying to get, I saw the question about the schoolhouse letter, and I will get that as soon as we're done with Q&A. I will pull some, or actually I can close out this screen real quick. And if I stop share, I can pull the links that y'all are requesting.
And another question is saying, unaccompanied homeless youth may be confusing to students. Will there be a definition provided for the word unaccompanied?
Typically, they'll have a question mark with like a blue circle around it that you hover over, and it gives you a better definition, like a more in-depth definition of what they're asking for.
And there is another question that states, I believe there was an error on the screen for independent status and then said in the paragraph, you are considered dependent, but was only requesting their income with spouse. Is there a review process to provide feedback to those building the new FAFSA?
Okay, so they they did a 60-day review process and a 30-day review process. These slides are from the 60-day review. So if they caught something and changed it in the 30-day review, I can go into the prototype to see, but these are the slides they gave us before 30-day review. So it could have been something that was caught in between those two that they haven't updated on the slide deck they gave us like a month and a half, 2 months ago, but it could be updated in the prototype. I'm happy to go through the prototype and see if I can pull a new screen grab to see if the language has changed. But every year, federal student aid has a public comment period on the application. They release the questions and how they're listed, and you're able to provide comment. And it's really interesting to see what everybody picks up on based upon their lens of the application. And if you reach out to me, I'm happy to like find time to pull the prototype and see if I can get the exact language as in the prototype right now.
And the last question I have is, you mentioned about the lizard that provides support to families. How do we get that?
So the parent wizard is the tool, and you need the paper copy, and I can get you that in a second. The parent wizard is digital as well as a paper version to help students determine who their parent is, if applicable. And so let me very quickly pull some links for y'all. I wish I had some like music to pull them to. So here's the Padlet. I'm going to put this in the chat. This is the Padlet. The who's the parent, like who's the contributor. there's that document. The prototype, if you want to play in the prototype, here's that link. And then let me get you the schoolhouse.
And thank you for putting all of these links in the chat. We will make sure to communicate and distribute it to the Washington Passport Network as well when we send the follow-up email to all attendees.
Oh, thank you for doing that. And then the independent student status for unaccompanied homeless youth determination, I just put that one in, and I see all your beautiful little animal icons as you're accessing it. And if you need one for some reason for 23-24, even though like most of the supplies 24-25, I just wanted to put that one in there as well. Other resources, questions.
There is one in the chat. Let me pull it up real quick. If McIntyre-Vento intake form was approved by a school district, what documentation will the student need when completing their FAFSA?
I would just encourage, like, anytime you're working with a student who has a McKinney-Vento determination, to ensure that that student has a copy of the determination before they leave your building. It's hard for them to get copies of that from the district office after school ends. And so what I would do is just, if they have a Google account or they have some place where they store it, like I have students, you know, this is a highly mobile population, so sometimes paper doesn't always work, but getting them a digital copy sometimes is helpful, just in case the financial aid office asks for it.
And I don't know if you already put the link for this, but the questions state, you showed the flow chart to use as a reference. Where do I get that?
Oh, for the who needs to create an FSA ID? Okay, so I have, it's in the presentation and I can share that link again. But I don't know if it's going to let me share. It's not going to let me share a graphic in here though. For that one, it's in the presentation I just gave, and let me put the link again so that you can access the presentation in Google Doc. I think that is the right one. Let me know if that's the right one for the Google Doc. I can click on it too. Yeah, so that one, and it's slide, as it loads very slowly on my computer. You're going to be looking at slide 15 for that process for FSA IDs. I put together a PowerPoint on the how to create an FSA ID if you are for parents who are undocumented, or if you're from a freely associated state. I am almost done getting I have to get like the blessing from comms on it. So as soon as I get their permission, then I'll be able to add that to the Padlet and then reuse it. If you can't access the Padlet, if your school has, if the school has blocked your access to Padlet, sometimes using your phone will help. It's just a Google product. And then you can always, if you're struggling with getting all the resources, email me, and I can try to load as much as you need onto a flash drive, as much as I can fit on a flash drive, and I can send it to you. I know there's a couple who can't access it. I've had a couple across the state.
I will read this last question because we're 2-3 minutes away from 2 o'clock. Unaccompanied homeless youth, if they take more than 2 or 3 quarters or terms off from school, do they need to be re-verified?
So if they like are in the same year, so like let's say they take let's say they start in the fall, they take winter and spring off, and they're going back in the fall, they're applying for a new financial aid year, they should be able to use the same determination.
Well, that's all of the questions for today. And if there are any additional questions that you all had that were unable to be answered, feel free to email those to Christina or us, and we'll make sure that Christina gets those. That way we can be in touch that way. But in the meantime, before that, we have a quick survey that we want attendees to fill out just to provide feedback or ways in which we could improve webinars for your attendance and all of that. So Hillary will put that survey link on the chat right now. And while we get that going, our next webinar will be on December 6th, 1 to 2 p.m. And the topic will be navigating Apple Health and mental health resources. We know that a lot of our students that we support do have mental health challenges, and it's close to the winter holidays. So we will be providing resources and ways to navigate and help students that may be in need of that. And if you have any questions about the webinar series, feel free to email us at thepassport@Collect Success Foundation, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. So if you want to be added to our mail list, we will also be happy to add you on that. But more resources will be available on the Washington Passport Network website about this webinar, and all of that will be posted by the end of this week. So thank you all for being here today, and thank you, Christina, for your collaboration and providing so much resource and information to our network.
Oh, thank you so much for having me out. I am just so appreciative of all the work that you do to support students. It's amazing. And I know y'all are working hard supporting students, because I get your emails at 6 a.m. and 10 o'clock at night. And I'm just so grateful that we get to do this work together. And so if there's anything I can do to help out, or if you have questions, or if there's a resource you need, please feel free to email me. I put my email in there. And yeah, I just appreciate y'all so much.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next time, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.